Welcome to today's episode of AI in Action, where we decode the latest trends in AI, from research to profit, the Applied AI Show. Your hosts, Rajan, founder and partner at the AI accelerator UPECA and involved in AI research, and Kashi, AI researcher, startup founder, and renowned AI voice, bridge the gap between breakthrough research and business results. Rajan brings deep expertise and AI-first transformation and emerging architectures, while Kashi contributes hands-on experience with research and implementation by building and deploying AI systems across industries. Together, they decode the latest developments in AI and agentic systems and translate them into actionable strategies for practitioners, founders, and business leaders. Their mission: help you turn cutting-edge AI research into real-world ROI.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kashi. I lead AI.
Yeah. My name is Tyagarajan. I go by Rajan, and I'm just so excited for this chat because a lot is happening in AI.
So you told lots happening in AI. I'll probably pick on that a little more. My first question to you is, over the holidays and going into 2026, we see some really powerful trends. What are the top three things you see with respect to what's happening in AI?
So Kashi, have you seen the tweet from our friend Akash in the morning today?
No,
If
I
not, you
didn't.
should watch it.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's just put out this tweet saying that on Jan 2nd, he had this big FOMO because he saw a lot of people getting into AI and especially Claude Code, right? And then they said, "Oh my God, I'm building these amazing things with using Claude Code." And then, towards the end, he also references me saying that I've been asking everybody to take a look at Claude Codes in the last 6 months. I think there are two very interesting things that have happened in the last year. If I were to just summarize the entire thing, there are two most important inflection point in my mind. One is in March when Cloud Code really came up. I came to know about it, like I would say April, and I would say like late May. That actually created, like I would call, like a quiet step jump, right? And the second one was Opus 4.5 on November. I remember that day, anti-gravity was getting launched in the AI engineering conference in New York. And that night, people made a big deal about anti-gravity, but that night, I think, Opus 4.5 went live. But the real impact of that was felt after the Anthropic guys created the holiday gift pass movement that they did, which is like, everybody can gift a Claude subscription. I think, Opus 4.5 was like a step jump. There were a lot of hallucination issues. There were a lot of things that were stopping when they initially from Cloud Code, but then Opus 4.5 started doing one-shotting of a lot of applications. Of course, there was Lovable and Bolt, and people were getting excited to do that. But real engineers, when they had the combination of Cloud Code and like Opus 4.5, they just were blown away. And that, I think, got accelerated when people had those holiday time during the Christmas break. And since then, the adoption of Cloud Code in building application and the faith in using AI coding tools that it'll help generate really good software application has exploded. So Akash saw that on second Jan, and since then, 23 days from there, he's built a lot of Cloudal that he had built before. Did a lot of migration, and like a lot of people are just experiencing, you can do lot with AI coding tools, right? I mean, we've already seen that, Cursor crossed about $1 billion of revenue in 24 months. We saw Claude cross $1 billion of revenue in 6 to 8 months. So something like really, really fundamental has shifted, and then that was experienced during the holidays. What is your take?
Very interesting. I think I'm going in 2026. I'm really excited about how the ecosystem itself is changing. Like, I see three powerful trends. I think OpenAI has kicked off one of such trends, which is nothing but apps within this AI ecosystems. People are very getting used to chat, and they're going to have applications running within them. I think they had given a preview of it long before, but I think this is coming mainstream. This really brings in the big question, right? What are big guns like Amazon, Flipkart of the world, or somebody else is going to do to really Are they going to compete? Are they going to collaborate? What's going to happen to their revenue models? It's going to be very exciting, and especially for enterprises to look out. Oh my God, they have one more new channel to deal with, and we do not know how this channel is going to behave. What are the new behaviors it's going to introduce? I think that's one thing. The second thing you talked about, like Anthropic giving away that gift, extra credits, and people getting people to try it, and new anti-gravity coming out from Google. I see it in two ways. If I'm an enterprise leader, one, I'm scared. Reason being that is, how do I deal with this AI? I would call it the explosion of software that's going to come. I do not know if my infra is ready if another 1,000 apps come into my landscape. The second thing is, what's the impact on security? A lot of questions would definitely come as a leader to me, but it also brings in a different dimension. If that's happening to me, if I'm a software services vendor, or if I'm a software a SaaS provider, it is really going to shake up that landscape and say, does the value really lie in software itself, or does the value lie in something else which we are going to really solve in time to come? So I see this huge explosion of apps, but I don't think there's enough infra in a lot of these enterprises to even host it and deal with it. So I really am truly excited of how that's going to shape up in near term and long term. Yeah.
So
So
yeah, yes,
yeah.
you'd say very interesting things. One is that how as an enterprise leader to think about this deluge that is coming, drinking from the fire hose, right? So I don't think it's just an enterprise guy's problem. I think it is my problem. I find the hours that are there in a day are short, and I think a lot of people who have this early adopter type of mindset, they want to sort of try things out first or early, they are facing this. A lot of people are talking about saying, I just wish there were 48 hours. This is the best time to be alive. Like, just, experiencing inflection points. And how do I actually keep up? And I had been actually thinking about how do you keep up. First, I want to talk a little bit about that. Is like, how as an individual to keep up, right? I have like a whiteboard, and, in the whiteboard, I have like, 15 things that I have listed saying, okay, I need to try this. I need to try Ralph Riggum in this way. I want to try gas down in that way. And I want to see like, how I can make sure Claude, the not the CLAUD, but CLAWD is used, and how is it gonna sort of help me create leverage for myself, do things from a 10x perspective. The question is like always there are more things, and you open Twitter or you actually meet somebody who's doing some tinkering like you, and I learn like 15 things. I speak to a friend of mine who's working on research. He tells me, hey, here is this deep seek research paper that came on Jan 1st. Have you read? Right. So there is just so much dilute. So one is I'm just thinking about how do I keep track, right? And that I think is a very important question, not just enterprise leaders, everybody has to do. So here are a few things that I try to jot down, and I'll see if this is going to help me. One is that I think that like in startup we always talk about saying, hey, pick the right mountain. That if you're in the right mountain, then just, or like there is an investor saying that rising tide lift all boats. Like if there is a big wave that is happening, then everybody that is participating is going to do well. I think that is true, and anybody who's picked up AI is always going to be part of this rising tide, like this massive platform shift that is there. But I'm also thinking about dealing with the deluges is to actually focus on just the slope. Like, pick one angle to go after, and then, like, not really spread yourself everywhere. At least I'm hoping that this will help me figure out a way to just deal with it, right? And I can't keep track of, like, what is happening at, let's say, a HBM level, like what is happening with, like, I don't know if you saw the news, Samsung literally doubled the price of the memory chips, right? And this is his huge implication. I mean, this is going to be like, cost implication for enterprise leaders. It is going to be implication from a, like, cloud compute cost that is going to come up, etc., etc. So you can't keep track of that, and all at the same time keep track of, okay, what is happening with, like, the agentic coding paradigm of Ralph Wiggum. So pick a slope, go deep. I'm trying to pick a few areas where I'm trying to go deep. And I also want to switch from just reading the news to reading signals, right? So I want to actually focus on things that are working, I'm more excited. I believe more when I actually see it working and I actually have experienced it. I just don't want to get caught into what the influencers are putting it. So while I'm on Twitter, I'm not paying too much attention to tweets, because the incentive for an influencer is to say, hey, we are cooked, because this happened with video, this happened with audio, and then we are cooked, right? So I believe a lot more on demos. So therefore, on weekly basis, like if somebody is building and creating weekly demos, I try to insert myself into that and say, okay, let me see what is happening in real action, right? So I'm rooting myself in demos and not really sort of giving into news and trying to focus on signals, right? So that's one thing. I also want to replace FOMO with taste. This is easier said than done. If you're working in startups, you'll always have FOMO, no matter what side, investor side, founder side, saying, hey, this other founder is taking off, or if this other startup is something that is doing that, we're not able to do. So I'm trying to shift there from FOMO to taste, saying, how do I understand how somebody is doing, right? Why, if there is a product that is built, then how are people doing this? If Perplexity, one thing that I love about Perplexity, it lets the user be lazy, right? Even though I don't use Perplexity a lot, but I like that design principle. So how to actually shift from FOMO to taste? And I'm building a lot of stuff, right? And this is all personal software. There is this new category that is emerging called personal software. Maybe there is going to be a user of one, right? And it is going to be just in time created software, where you will create the software just now for your use and then maybe throw away. It's a radical thought, but I have more than 15 applications that I've built. You've helped me build a few of them. So ship, right? And learn and I don't even do something big, right? Like the last one that I did called Name or Not, a lot of conversation that comes to me is like, hey, I have this idea, I have this product, how do I name? I used to run a checklist. I used to run 3 different checklists on that. That checklist turned into a prompt. That prompt and domain query. So then I combined it and put it on it saying, hey, nameornot.com. So it actually compresses a lot of steps for me. And I'm like, okay, look, I know that I will not get to do everything. So I allow awe, but without the obligation. So that is how I'm dealing. I wonder, what is the enterprise version of it, right? As to, this is how I'm dealing with it from an individual perspective. Have you seen something, Kashi? How are you dealing with this?
Good question. I think the way to deal with it is like how you told. We have to set our strategic priorities into buckets, saying that where do we as humans invest time? Where do we let AI do its work? How do we actually give work to AI? That becomes the second bucket. And the third bucket is like probably thinking larger. Actually, you spoke about that trend in a very subtle way. You told you're going to create a lot of these applications for yourself, like one-time living applications. So if you, how does, let's say we blow it out of proportion, right? Previously, if you had to present something, we would do PowerPoints or we would do documents, and now we do apps. So fundamentally, the fundamental workflow nature of it is changing. So I think when we look at it from an enterprise perspective, so if I'm an e-com company, say both of us sitting here and we automatically size our clothing and say, hey, this is what might look best for you on this scenario. So probably we are going to throw in very personalized software. That's how I look at it. If you are doing it for yourself, you want to do it at scale for millions and millions of users, which fundamentally makes a paradigm shift, right? So it is not personalized for you, personalized at scale. That's really as a paradigm that's going to grow. The second trend that I see from an enterprise perspective is that if that happens, right, how do I deal with the complexity of change in human preferences? Like, what are the new measures and that I put in such that I'm able to cater to them, right? So, so this is where if everybody is trying to change, do I be part of somebody's change, or do I create my own version of it? I think that that's one of the dilemmas enterprise have to deal with. I think we started the conversation with that, right? ChatGPT is starting off a trend called agentic commerce. How this spawn if I'm an e-com, or like if I'm a small vendor running Shopify, my own apps, how will Shopify transform itself, right? So I think from an enterprise perspective, it's all about taking the small problems and scaling it with unit economics. I think those are the conversations that I see happening across the board. On I think strategically prioritizing them and going with taking the right research, applying the right unique economics to create a sustainable business is something that's always enterprises have been thinking, is how I would like to see it. Since we are on this topic, right? We talked about enterprises. I see a lot of enterprises struggling yet with AI pilots, and so is the case with startups. Like people are not yet able to adopt Claude Code or any other technology yet at scale. Since you have been working with lots and lots of them, like maybe hundreds, I know about 10 or 15, but you're working at 10x my scale. Um, my question to you is that why do you think this happens? Why do AI pilots not take the form it's supposed to take? To where do people get stuck, and how do we unwind them?
Tell me again, how do people get stuck in
Why do
what?
people get stuck? Why do you think in your in their AI journey they're getting stuck? Whether they're adopting Cloud Core or something else, where is the
Yeah.
mindset problem that you see in your interaction?
I think, someone said this very interesting about, year and a sorry, week and a half ago. I mean, week and a half feels like year and a half
Yeah.
in AI, right?
Mm.
So like, he said, look, dealing with AI seems to be like dealing with COVID, right? In like not in a negative sense, but in the sense of like dealing with exponential curves,
Correct.
right? We as humans are not designed to deal with exponential curves, right? Whatever we were like, taught for the last 15 years. I mean, if I'm an engineer, I'm an architect, like, whatever I have experienced in the software industry as an architect, as a senior principal engineer, like, it had some assumptions baked into it. And those assumptions are now getting appended to the level that, when somebody comes and says, don't do code review. Like, for instance, one of the things that I'm seeing right now is this human in the loop. Everybody talks about human in the loop, but when humans become the bottleneck, and even if somebody says that, look, the traditional way of SDLC was like, somebody goes and talks to customer, gets requirement documents, scopes it, prices it, kicks off a project, does a design, then like developers come and do code, then you review, then you do unit testing, user testing, and then like acceptance testing, and then the software becomes TA, right? So this is how it was done. So a lot of people are not able to sort of just get out of the mold that that development step that you're talking about, that used to consume 80% of the time in all of this, right? And that 80% of the time is literally compressed. Many people are not willing to believe that that quality of that code is really good. And I think that is where the Opus 4.5 moment in November gave a huge blow to a lot of people, right? And they're not able to realize that, when you ask Claude Code to go and build something, it almost gets like, 95% right. Of course, you need to sort of go through a lot of iteration. It may not have taken care of like retries, and it would have not done things in a robust. It's just a matter of few more prompts and things like that. So anything that would have taken 6 months can actually be built under a week, right? In the similar scale and capacity. So most people are not able to make sense of that, right? Saying, or and many people had disbelief. One other thing with AI, Kashi, is like 15 years ago, I built an AI startup back then where I used to feature engineer. I built a computer vision startup, and AI had gone through multiple winters, right? So there is a lot of skepticism, and the older you are, like let's say you were working in the industry for 40 years, you have for like maybe 25 years, you have seen a lot of winters of AI come through, and you are not willing to believe that this time it might be different, right? So but funnily enough, I'm seeing some 40 plus year old veterans come back and then say, hey, they are having the best time, especially Stevie Yagi, right? Who's written these rants while his the time at Microsoft or at Amazon, and saying how engineering needs to get done. And now he's at AMP, and he's literally leading the, like I would say, he's at the tip of how this new way of software development needs to be done. So I would say that, our inability to deal with exponential, whenever the exponential change happens, past skepticism, and you built an entire career for like 15 years or 20 years where your identity were around an assumption saying, hey, good quality means it has had to go through like a code review. Now you don't do human in the loop, you have to do human on the loop. Because if you're generating 10,000 lines of code, let's say 1,000 lines of code in a day, then the human review step becomes the bottleneck. So you cannot use the step of saying, okay, I will do human review. Unless there is a human review, I won't check box and I won't let the software go. And you see somebody else who's generated 10,000 lines of code and he's released the app, and you see that he has like 10,000 users, and you're like, oh my God, what just happened, right? So these kind of dissonance, when you deal with exponential change, is why I see a lot of people are struggling, right? So I'd been experiencing Claude Code. Like I said, I didn't want to believe anybody. I'd been experiencing Claude Code and agentic coding tools. And since November, there are so many things that are different. When I look at Ralph Ligum, Gastown and Loom projects, this is further changing how software engineering gets done or ought to get done. And that exponential curve just seems to be accelerating. There's one more thing that I would say, and I think, I'd love to know what you think as well, right? I think one thing that has helped me make sense of this is the word scaling law. And I heard this first from Satya, right? And Satya kept referring to it again and again for the last, I would say, 18, 24 months. And he talked about scaling law is the Moore's law of the AI industry. A scaling law apparently is like technically speaking, and I think I should talk a little bit about research and technical things as well. But the original scaling law was called the Chinchilla paper, and then there was like a follow-up to that talks about saying, hey, there is log relationship between compute data and I'm forgetting one more parameter, right? There's a log distribution, there's a log relationship between this. I actually made a layman's version of scaling law. The way I would say that, and I know the research friends will kill me for this, but I would say that scaling law means like every 6 months, the cost of intelligence is dropping by 10x, and the improvement in AI is at least 30%. Right. So what that means is that there are newer use cases that are getting unlocked. The coding use case got unlocked today, but maybe the music use case gets unlocked next based on the changes in the intelligence that is happening. Now, when these things add up and compound, every 6 months, you have to think about this as a reset. Right. The specific example that I can give you is that most people who built their mental models around GPT-4o could not understand what O1 when the reasoning tokens were involved. Right. In fact, a lot of researchers poo-pooed saying, what is research tokens? This is just, something that researchers a reasoning token. This is something that researchers have already known, and you just gave a fancy marketing name to that. But O1 was another inflection point. It was like a step jump. And if you listen to people like Sam and Satya, right? They say that, look, we know that this is going to happen. We don't know what the next inference time compute is going to be, but we can expect that it will come, and we will have to place for where the puck is going, right? So I would therefore say that that ability to not understand how these exponential changes. So if you anticipate that the exponential change is going to be there, then you will be willing to leave away some of your old assumption, right? And those inflections are happening now faster than it used to happen before.
I think well said. The rate of change is so fast that it's neither possible for organization to keep up nor for humans. But I think instead of fearing the change, it's important to dive in, like what we are doing every weekend or every other day, to really see how do we get ahead and probably be part of that wave so that we can ride the wave when the time is right. So I think it's a very important thought. So zoning in, probably I'll ask a very simple question. Um, while all this happening, right, what are the biggest lie people are telling to themselves about AI? Or what are the biggest lie you see people are telling about AI? So I see a lot of positives and negatives. I just want to see if there's any critic view that you have on what people are lying about AI.
Well, I wouldn't say lying about AI. I think what I think people are perhaps mistaken, right, is when they celebrate
Delusional.
pilots.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think you should celebrate pilots. I mean, pilots is where you can do some demos tricks and then say, oh, this is fine, right? The people that are really making big impact, where they are able to sort of change the pilots to production, and where on the production, you're having like, a leverage, a competitive advantage that of speed, or like getting to a position in the value chain that, it gives you a lot of strength, right? That is where I think people who are doing great stuff versus people who are just getting excited, creating a lot of noise, a lot of froth, right? Doing so the lying part, I would say, is if you think that, we've done great pilots and you're doing PR and saying that this is fantastic, that's the place where you're lying to yourself. You're not neither here nor there. It looks like you're a believer, but then, you have not had the like, change for yourself, and then you'll feel later dejected. So that's the lying I think, people should stop doing to themselves.
It's very
What's
well
your
said.
take?
Uh,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I didn't think about the answer, but the way I see it is often depending on the use case and depending on the industry. Uh, People assume that it is a 5 minute or a like few day problem that you delegate everything to this Cloud Opus or any of the coding model and sort of have it solved. But real hard work, solving tough problems requires time. Um, unless you have found a use case that is easiest to solve, I think that's one thing people are probably painting the wrong picture, either within the organization or to their customers or to the industry. Um, in my mind, this is going to take time, similar to how Tesla Autopilot is going. It's going to be incremental. While the impact on coding seems um, very promising and it's happening at scale, but I think there are still a lot of steps that need to be taken such that there's a what I would say is difference between reality and
Right, right,
what's the
right.
promise when you told like demos do not represent the final outcome. So when it comes to industries like manufacturing or healthcare or BFSI, I think this is going to take a little more time, but the time is well invested because the safeguards that are required to operate in those domains and industry are for welfare of all humanity. We cannot let a bank be run by AI as such. But I do also see that you would have seen Retail Bench, which is a benchmark to measure whether an AI can manage a vending machine or a vending
Mm.
bench. So I think that as industry, we need to put together these benchmarks at an industry level to see what is the level of maturity curve that's happening. Like a new bank came in and disrupted banking. I see something like a AI fintech coming and disrupting fintech. I see a different model of it. A new business model is going to be born. And I think
Mm.
looking at where we are and trying to transform is not the way that might play out. But I totally see a new model itself emerging, and that's how the gameplay is going to spawn out, is how I envision this uh,
Got it, got it. So
spawning
Kashi,
out.
I wanna ask you this question. I know you had told this a little bit, but I'm a Cloud Code fan, right?
Mm,
And you actually showed me, right, that there are places where Cloud Code hit limits, and you said,
yeah,
I had to use Gemini model.
yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah. So I think we know where that's going, but importantly, um, Claude is amazing at I mean, what I was trying to experiment is Claude gave this wonderful feature where you can delegate to multiple agents. That's the experiment
That's
we are
very
trying
nice.
to run and trying to build benchmarks around it. And I sort of sometimes realize that the power of context is very different when it comes to how each model interprets. So I do see that Gemini's $2 million context window, when we started running the analysis, became a powerful way in which, because it could hold a lot of content in its context, and the result was higher degrees of accuracy for certain use cases versus when it comes to Claude itself. So I think this is a short-term paradigm if we have to really speak. I do strongly believe that in next 3 to 6 months, all models will have large context windows, have high ability to iterate and run for longer hours. Uh, but in the short term, the difference between Claude, Gemini, and others. I mean, I'm also a big fan of Minimax and GLM and all the Chinese models which we have been tinkering with. So I see their potential equally, all of them to be equally powerful in solving this problem. In fact, I'm a big fan of DeepSeek as well. DeepSeek Coder, Quen Coder, they are truly amazing for many use cases, which I think even Claude is great, but certain things what a Quen coder can do, I've seen Claude not being able to do even after 5, 7, 10 prompts. So the degree of fine tuning that each of these models have is varied today, but I think over a period of time they'll sort of get standardized. Is how I see it play out.
Yeah, I also remember you mentioned this that, look, there is this one difference between the Claude Code and Gemini from a context size perspective, but because the sizes are different, how you are able to actually manage that, right? And there is this new word that has come up, which was initially a little confusing for me, called harness.
Yeah.
Saying like, there was this whole thing about context, and then there was this whole thing about harness. Harness and context, I think, is approximately similar, but harness basically says that, the context that you're using, how are you running the loop, right? How are you creating those sub agents, and how are you creating those prompts, how are you doing those tool callings, and how are you doing that differently? Like even in the Ralph Wiggum plugin, the official Ralph Wiggum plugin is not appreciated because it doesn't reset the context when people when it is invoked again inside the loop. But the other plugin that Jeffrey Antley had created, it actually resets the context. So the difference is the hardness was different in how the way, like the context was used was different. So how do you actually use a bigger context size, but also how do you actually do those invocation of tools, and like how you actually write the prompt, because the context size are different, and how you create that, therefore that hardness is what actually differentiates, right? And that is why we see that like when you use Claude Code inside like a CLI versus you use the same Claude Code inside a cursor, or you use that Claude Code inside an AMP, the models are
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
With
The
Opus
model
4
behaves totally differently. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the model behaves totally differently. So I think that is very important, and this keeps.
Rajan, I want to draw us back to the conversation we were having earlier. Now that OpenAI has launched this e-com capability in apps capability, who do you think it is for? Do you think it'll be like the Android Play Store where every Tom, Dick, and Harry will go and create an app and there'll be explosion of AI apps within the OpenAI store, or will it play out that, hey, this is not everything is meant for um, just startups or like individual developers? Will it explode to a situation that, hey, this maybe only enterprise should try it? Where do you think it to be going in this current 2026?
See, with respect to OpenAI's, at least this announcement, right? I think I'm paying more attention to what Shopify is doing on top of this, right? And I saw Toby's tweet on that,
Hmm.
and he's taking it very seriously. So I have a little more optimistic view about it this time. But I think, we've had this conversation multiple times in the last 2 years. Right. So we saw GPT store, we saw GPTs, right? And I don't think they took off in that way. There were two attempts that OpenAI did, and the last two attempts they have not gotten it right. That doesn't mean that
Why do you
they
think
won't
that
get it
happened?
right.
Why do you think
I
that
think GPTs, if you have built GPTs, I have built a lot of GPTs. I try to use some of the GPTs. Like, for instance, I built a GPT which allows me to create a website teardown. I used to do this on SaaS websites. So I had like a checklist. I had like 2, 3 founders that come and teach founders on how to actually build a website. So I built that. But I don't see myself using that again. So these days when people come, I give them that GPT. But I don't think, the GPT experience is good enough. Like, if you build a GPT and then, you put it out there, there is some like, instructions that you give, and then, you put some prompt. I don't think, it is generating that magic that leads to people coming back to that particular point again. See, app stores we have seen, right? App stores have to solve three problems in my mind. Like, one is it has to solve the discovery problem. The second it has to solve is the billing problem. The third it has to solve is the customer support problem. Now, whether you are a telecom, you solve these three things. Then, you are iPhone app store, you have to solve these three things. And then, like, between the developer and the app store owner, like whether it is a telecom. In case of telecoms, telecom used to keep 70% of revenue and would give developer 30%, right? That was the good old MVAS days, right? Mobile value added services days. That was replaced by mobile app stores. And app stores in general have been like loss leaders. Maybe Apple turned a profit on the Apple App Store, but it has always been like a platform game where, like, it was like a cheap way for some of these platforms to figure out, like, what are apps that are coming. It actually created moat for them. So these problems have to be solved. So if I look at the GPT store, I think, the discovery is a little broken, right? This time what they have done differently is they have said, look, we will want to own a certain percentage of payment that goes through this, and that is the part that Shopify is experiencing. And if, let's say, a GPT doesn't work and somebody has paid for that, then, how do you actually support that? The way Apple does it is that, like, if you lose a user trust, they can actually kick you out of the platform, right? So therefore, I think, in the mobile app store, the platform and the app store is working really well. I'm only cautiously optimistic about this, especially because of Shopify. But at the same time, if you look at it, Claude seems to be making product decisions which are phenomenal, right? So the one thing that I'm focusing on right now is this Claude skills. Not Claude plugins, but Claude skills, right? Where Claude skills are like, they seem to be those, before I do something, I want to make sure that this happens. Or I know a lot of people use a front end skill. I know a lot of people who use a security skill, which is like, I built this application, then I want to do something which is equivalent to a pen testing. So I'm going to do that. So I'm very excited about skills. And I feel that, the skills may actually naturally lead to Mobi on App Store. But the ChatGPT App Store, I'm just cautiously optimistic by that. But to your point about agentic commerce, and agentic commerce is something that we've been talking about since 2025, right? Beginning of agentic, and agentic commerce has huge implication for e-commerce, right? And just like how e-commerce had an implication for retail commerce. Imagine when an agent can go and buy books on your behalf, right? A lot of things are going to be very different, right? How people do that discovery, SEO, SEM, like, merchandising, like, the tech stack for that. A lot of that will change. But I think for agentic commerce also to pick up, I think a lot of building blocks have to be put in, right? How are you going to solve for the trust problems? How are you going to sort of, the payments are not figured out. I mean, assume that you are going to do agentic commerce, then, like, if you give it to agents, then the speed jumps up, right? And if the speed jumps up, that, do you have infra ready to support authentication, support payments, support trust issues? What is the new type of reviews will look like? What is the new type of buying comparison will look like? How will the behavior from a human asking agents to actually make purchase happen? A lot of that will have to be thought through differently. I think, a lot of infra work is needed. While it is bound to happen, I think, we like, a lot of people have seen the demos. Some people have actually seen actual production live use cases. And maybe one of the platform guys, like, ChatGPT is the one that will lead the world with the agentic commerce. I will have some reservation in 2026 to say that if OpenAI will be the one that will lead the agentic commerce for us.
That's interesting. I think I have a similar set of thoughts, but I think I look at it from a difference in the workload, be it agent e-commerce or agent as a broker as a paradigm. That's how I look at it. Today, most of the interaction for us, like, we are still yet to understand AI as humans. So, or what its capabilities truly are. We have used automation in the past. So the way I look at it is like, until we as a human layer fully understand what is the degree of trust I can place on these
Agents.
platforms, I do not think I would jump to place my trust on it, and place my belief that what it's giving is the right thing for me. So I think we'll have to graduate that layer of thinking, and then probably go to the second layer, which is like, if I place my trust, we are both familiar with Claude, so I'll probably jump back to Claude. The first version of code it gives, I go through an iteration, and then I go to next, and like after a couple of iterations, I say, okay, this is exactly what I need. So now to go through that loop with something like a agentic commerce platform, I think it would require us to reimagine the experiences. And as you rightly said, I don't think that experience is ready. So I think that is one of the hindrance I see in adoption. The second, flipping the story to an enterprise perspective or from a manufacturer or a seller perspective, even if I were to adopt it, for me, I think what I'm going to really be scared is like, if would I miss out that key insight that I was collecting before about, let's say, Rajan or some other customer, and my ability to serve them, and how will that play out in long term? So unless I'm going to own the agentic, the data behind it, and that uh, interaction with my end customer, uh, having an agent broker or somebody else do it for me, I think that evolution is at least 3 to 5 years away for in my mind. It's too early to play that game. Probably it's like is how I would see that playing out. On that note, I want to spark an important topic, right? OpenAI also launched Indic QA benchmark, which is about Indian languages. Every organization is planning to launch their own benchmark. For example, we come back to the example of vending bench. Do you see that? How do you see this playing out, right? Would you have benchmarks by country, by industry, by domain, or even by organization? What are the trends that you are seeing? And you are building a benchmark yourself. So I'd love to know what you're building. And then where do you see this benchmark game actually go, and how will it actually spawn out in time to come?
You may find the most unexpected answer from me on benchmarks,
Yeah.
even though I'm working on one benchmark. I think benchmark is marketing.
Okay.
In the sense that, see, I don't know if anybody has read SweBench, right? If you go through SweBench, you read through SweBench. I mean, the first version of SweBench is okay. Here are like
There's a
bunch of
bunch of
GitHub
test
repos,
cases. Yeah.
right? Here are a bunch of GitHub repos. Here are like, some task on Python, right? And here is the right answer, and here are like 50 of them. Like if you actually pass, then you're like it started with saying 30% and 50% and like now whatever 70% and 90% and things like that, right? I think benchmarks is like I was trying to explain benchmark to someone. I said like benchmark is like this driver's test that we do when we go get our license, right? And the test is that, right? And it is important. I'm not saying, I mean, maybe I trivialized it saying that it is marketing. It is important, right? Before people actually come and say, hey, before you actually drive a car, you need to actually pass a test on basics saying, hey, do you know what an ABC is, accelerator, brake? I mean, these days there are no manual shift cars, but when there was manual car, you need to know what the ABC is, what a stop sign is, and you need to have like basic understanding of traffic laws. And if you ever get a license, like it's not very people go through a lot of stress in passing that, but that is needed. But you won't get a license because you passed the written test. You will get a license when somebody is sitting next to you and is observing you actually go and drive the car in the real world. He will then assess you and then say, hey, this is what it is. So I think, one thing that we should do is to differentiate between benchmarks versus, I know this is another word which has a very, like, highly debated word, which is like, you need to have benchmarks for your own organization, which is not called benchmarks, which are called evals. Right? Yeah, I said, like, evals are again debated. But to say that, look, here are my specific use cases. Here is my code base. Here are my practices of software engineering. And this is what I want a developer to do when he comes here. And is my current setup of Claude skills and whatever else, the harness and things that I'm creating, are they going to work for my organization? I think that is the place where organization have to go. It can't be that, look, there is like a generic one. And I think we are at a state of the industry where we are still designing the driver's written test, right? And that is where we see the vending bench. That is where vending bench is basically a sweep bench for the retail industry,
Yeah.
right? And practically every industry will first have to start with that. But that is where you cannot stop. I mean, because like if you stop there, then you will have that same issue that we talked about earlier, right? Saying that, you'll think, oh, demos are great, everything is great, but then, you take it to production and then see like things are working, and then you blame the AI. You should not blame the AI. You should say that, look, did I use the AI correct in my context, and I really leverage it, right? So I know it is a language thing, is how it is coming across, but I would say that, there are benchmarks and there are evals. When you build benchmarks for your own company, right? That can be approximately called as evals. I mean, one problem with the AI is that these terms are new. Different people have different interpretation, and people get religious about it. So I know there is a religious war around
What to call it?
evals that are, yeah, evals are going on. But I would say it is a benchmark plus plus, right? That is needed. Every enterprise has to think about what is their benchmark plus plus, because the benchmark is going to be only enough for, like, saying, hey, pilots worked, right? To work in a particular enterprise context, they have to say, hey, what is my benchmark? What is my evals? Right? And what is it that I need to make sure that, I'm getting the bang for the buck when I'm using. Anything you disagree?
Oh, no, absolutely spot on. And in this conversation, you also brought in something very interesting, right? You talked about whether enterprises accepting that particular benchmark or not becomes a paradigm. But I also found that a lot of people and enterprises, who people are a proxy to what enterprises really think, is that they are not really understanding what this really means. I think in real world, they are like, oh, I gave the stars to AI, I expect it to be 100% accurate. So people have not got stock market predictions right for ages. They've not got currency. I mean, you are able to do to some extent. I'm not totally thrashing it because I've been that on that side of the world as well. But having said that, um, every prediction is bound to go wrong. It's just your hunch. It's a hypothesis based on the prior data. And when you use these words, people are like, oh, your AI doesn't work. And they probably are not benchmarking whether themselves, were they good enough to actually predict uh, by their actual human work or something like that. I actually want to do reverse. Now I want to start a new benchmark, which is humans versus AI. Are you as good enough as AI? I think then you start really realizing that the quantum of work that is done by AI is very different, and it has a different capability totally than humans. And you have a lot of
I had a chuckle.
use it.
Interesting you say that. I had a chuckle last week.
Yeah.
Google released, I think, either a product or, like, maybe a feature where students who are appearing for SAT can actually work with this application and then, become better, right? So so for me, the chuckle was that so far we had been building benchmarks for model, saying, are you good? Right? Now those models are helping us cross our benchmarks, right? Which is
Ah,
the SAT exam, right? So this is what you are also saying, then, are you as
no,
good
we
as
were
the
always
AI?
benchmark as kids, right? Oh, your your best friend who comes to your house
Exactly.
in the evening to play is a benchmark for your mom, saying that you are
Exactly.
your marks good enough, otherwise you are not, like you're below the benchmark.
Correct,
So
correct, correct. Absolutely. Today for us, the across India is the new benchmark is Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai,
yeah,
right?
you're not as good enough as him.
As good as an FM. Right, right.
So I think probably we'll close this conversation with the last note. What are the three things that you uniquely see? So
No, no, I don't want to sort of like get to that yet. I had a question for you, and we will
yeah.
maybe keep it brief. What is the research paper you are reading,
Oh,
that you got
I'm
excited by?
probably that's a topic for the next time, but I'm reading this two research papers, the way MIT really cracked the context problem, which is actually storing the context, etc. I'm like, oh, obvious, we could have written that research paper yesterday. I think I would strongly recommend everyone to read it. Basically, how do you use some of the old world techniques that already existed. So
Hmm.
context management is a big problem. MIT call it infinite context management. There's no
Hmm.
infinite database as such, but probably the way they put it
Maybe
is
that's
really,
the title, right, to make
yeah,
it
the title.
provocative.
But what's interesting is the architecture behind how they are thinking to store it and retrieve it and reprocess it such that continuity can be established. I think that's one breakthrough. The second paper that I'm really interested is like Today, actually, DeepSeek solved this problem called mixture of experts long back. But I strongly believe that there's a huge opportunity where this MOEs can be induced in real time. And I'm trying to see how that will be a big paradigm shift, because today what happens is you have a set of model weights, and once they are frozen, and this to some extent RLM is coming through. But I strongly think that if you have ability to induce real time entire model as a mixture of expert, which is logically correct and possible, I think that'll be a big breakthrough in how we scale models without really going through the entire paradigm of retraining, to which I look up to Chinese universities and the papers they are publishing. I think that's close to be I strongly believe that will be cracked in next 1 year or so, and that will be a paradigm shift, because in terms of cutting the retraining cycles, I think I mean, if you really look at it in a simplistic world, models are weights, and weights are represented in some form in data storage, and they have a path to follow, and for it to be programmatically changed, only a part of it, especially in models like MOE. I think the larger the model, the better it gets by replacing. And I think that's something I'm looking forward to. That's an area of research that I'm focused on. Yeah.
Yeah, you put the link of the paper, like share with me. I'm also going to sort of read that. All right. So your question was like, what are three things? Usually in conversation like this, it takes some time to actually think about how to, think about three things. I will talk about what is top of mind, right? And one or two of these I even tweeted. One of the conversations that I've been having is where people are saying, okay, I want to actually talk about this. This is the whole shadow IT thing. Um, just like how it happened in mobile, we are going to see like in mobile, the way some of these things came into the enterprise was because the employees brought in, right? Usually it very very many years ago, strong technology actually used to come to the enterprise, but now it is first coming into the consumer's hand, and then it comes to the enterprise, right? So we had way more powerful iPhones before, iPhones were allowed inside an enterprise. So there was BYOD. So we're going to see BYOM. And most people actually think about BYOM as something that is as a risk. I think, you have to think about it slightly differently. And this is a talent versus a change management and talent conversation we were having. I think you should find out in your organization who is already using a $200 Claude Code subscription, and not find a way to actually block him. Find a way to say to him, is saying that, look, come and do office hours and brown bags with us. Show us how you're doing. Open your Claude. I mean, there is this tool which actually allows you to track all the Claude conversation that you've had, right? Simon Wilson had built it. So you just ask him to show how he's using his Claude session, so that he can show it to others. Because the moment, this is the guy who's going to be your future most important employee, because he's already used the Claude Code and he's become 10x or maybe even 100x. And he's the guy who's going to help you figure out how to actually move forward. If you don't harness him, if you don't take advantage of him, instead of going to create barriers for him, he's already updating his LinkedIn, or there are already people reaching out to him, right? So there is going to be BYOM that is going to happen, and you want to find out that who are people who are doing the BYOM, because literally they are going to be the future of the company. That's one part. The second part that I also had a conversation and tweeted about this is a lot of people saying, hey, oh, we got this right and we are using some model, but we are not getting budgets, we are not getting token budgets approved. So one of the things that I suggested is, please go to your CFO. In fact, this launch happened yesterday. I don't know, Kashi, you got your hands on Cloud for Excel. Again, mind-blowing product. These Anthropic guys get their product chops always right. They get the models right, but the product chops are always right. They did a
I
fab
wonder
job.
how. I really wonder how.
Okay, my thesis is it's the CPO, right? The CPO
Okay.
comes from Instagram. He is like one of the most smartest product guys I have seen. So I think a lot of thought process. I think between ChatGPT and OpenAI and Anthropic, there are a lot of ex-Stripe folks, ex-Facebook folks, and I mean Facebook meaning Instagram. But in this particular case, that Facebook slash Instagram guy went to Anthropic, and I can see that, written all over their products, right? Whether it was, they did not build a browser, they built a Chrome plugin, right? And I mean, they focused more on the CLI before they moved to other form factors. So somehow they intuitively get all these product choices right. So coming back to the point that I said, right, Claude for Excel is again like a mind-blowing product. So first go convert your CFO to use Claude, give him Claude for Excel, give him Claude Cowork, and get him hooked onto it. Then your budgets will get approved, right? So, before you can convert a developer or like convince your engineering manager, if you go and convince your CFO, he's like, holy cow, like how are we not using this before? So that's the second thing. The third thing that I would say is like, it goes back to the scaling law. My manager used to say when I used to work in product, saying, look, when you are talking to users coming back and thinking about it, she'd use this phrase, which I absolutely loved. She said, suspend judgment for a moment. We as humans are these characters who always would judge, right? So I've tried to use that phrase to saying, suspend your assumption. Whatever your assumption was for the last 3 months, 6 months, and Kashi and I've had this
Yeah,
conversation,
we have
right?
been
Like,
having this conversation a lot.
say
Yeah,
suspend your assumption. Like what you experienced 6 months ago, please, if you were like, very sure that, Claude is great and OpenAI is crap, suspend that assumption, go try Codex again.
yeah. Honestly,
Right? So that is
I'm mind blown by the
that is
very
the third thing.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the third thing that I would say, that, every 6 months of scaling law says that, it is going to reset the window, and like, what used to work, you can actually see different things happen. So you have to find a way to suspend maybe the assumption and judgment are the same. You have to find a way to suspend that judgment. I think these are two, three things that is coming to the top of my mind.
Interesting. I'm doing something different. Before you ask me what are you doing, so I think I pull you into some of them. Actually, I'm going on speaking to with a lot of multi-generational users, giving them technology and seeing how does it actually play out. I think one of the conversations you had. So I see it's changing a lot of behavioral patterns. The one you tried, right? What is developer doing when Claude is coding? They want a pet, they want a game, they want something to keep them engaged. Yet they want to see the screen within the same ID. That was a huge insight for me. I mean, that's something that I could never even imagine. For me, I would rather watch the screen than. So people are getting bored when Claude is doing work, so they want something to engage. A huge
Stressed. They're not just
stress,
bored, they're stressed.
other stress, tensed, everything, right? Um, the second thing I saw is I have a 10-year-old at home with whom I sometimes play. But he came back and says, "Hey, I want to build an AI." I said, "Okay, like, can you please explain to me what does it mean to you? Like, now, are you going to use an AI to build an AI, or are you going to build one like for me? Like what?" So I started to tear it down a lot and trying to understand what does it really mean for them. So for us, delegation is like, for example, getting two agents to do the work is a probably a learning curve for us, and a mind it's a very hard task to master. For them it comes so instinctively that I didn't even need to explain. Okay, you he figured it out before I could figure it out, and that was like, okay, I need to learn something. And said, what led you to actually figure this out much better at 10 year figuring out how to build an AI app with by delegating to multiple AI agents? That's mind blowing. And then the kind of interactions they have and the commands they give is far different. That is going to shape the future of products in time to come, which means that different persona, persona you told, right? Give a CFO the AI Excel. So we have to figure out the personality, the trait before we actually go and build AI. So I think that's where I'm spending a lot of time, especially now. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that reminds me of a Kevin Kelly quote. I don't think I will get the exact quote right. He says that, any technology that we experience after 35 years old, it looks like an alien technology. Our parents struggled with WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
And any technology that we experience when we are less than 35, it doesn't look like magic. It looks like this is how naturally it be. I mean, your kid is like 10 years old, but it's so natural for them to do. And somebody who's like over that edge is like, oh my God, like this is like, completely new, right? That's the kind of
Yeah,
wonder
he
that we
figured
have.
out he used it to hack the Google TV. So that's how he figured it out. He wanted to, like, we have put parental lock, like, we stay in a multi-generation home, so there's a parental lock on it. And he got rid of it, and he used my mom's phone to tether with Wi-Fi. I'm like, oh my God, like his goal is achieved, but it really puts a begging question saying that, hey, the controls that we have put in place, we presume are great and known to be the best, but they don't stand the test of time. So I
Right,
think
right.
it's really something that we are all learning from each other, and I think that will shape the way products will come in future.
Got a hot take on AI? A burning question? Let us know what you'd like us to debate next. And hey, if you want to jump in the ring with us, drop your LinkedIn link and the topic you're itching to discuss. We'd love to have you on the show.